Okay, next on our agenda is our lunch. Oh, we already had that, didn't we? I guess we won't do that.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, you want to be here till midnight?
No. Okay, next is our legislative review of the bills, and we had a time certain there, but we didn't, and we had a little placeholder here in case we had legislators that needed to come before us, and we don't have any today. So under our legislative legislative section, we'll start off with Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings. And so, are you ready to join us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, board members. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. We're going to start by reviewing some bills today, and I will go through the first two bills, which are both bills that are related to policy requests that our staff requested and that we previously ran by you. So these should both sound familiar to you. So the first one is SB 145. This bill is the Military Family Education Amendments, and it will allow students who are or children of military families to be able to enroll in one of our school districts or charter schools, online schools, before they actually come to the state, as well as if we have military family who's in the state and is about to leave, it allows the student to stay in the online course or program until for a certain time, even though the parents may move or the family moves outside of the state. So it essentially allows students from military families to have early access to programs when they're about to move and to remain in Utah public education programs for a certain period of time after their parents leave due to active duty or active transfers. I'm happy to answer questions, or I will move on to the next bill.
Move on to the next bill, because I'm not seeing any hands. I know you're going quickly.
Great. The next one is SB 145, Teacher Salary Supplement Program Amendments by Senator Sandal. This bill, as you'll remember, would add 7 of our deaf educators who have a deaf education license. All 7 of these educators work for the Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind. It would allow them to be eligible for the Teacher Salary Supplement Program. And so you'll see in the bill that it adds an eligible teacher is a teacher who has a professional education license issued by the board. And by the way, both of these bills will be in the Senate Education Committee tomorrow. Any questions about SB 154?
I have not seen any hands raised.
Great. And I had a recommendation, Chair Huntsman, but please let me know if you disagree, that after reviewing these two bills, that we may want to open it up to board members to let us know if there are certain bills they want to discuss because we're short on time, or I can move forward.
Okay, Vice Chair Davis has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. My question was about the last one we just discussed. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, I'm wondering, looks like that addition was added in for a deaf educator with a degree from the state. You know, I had a call from another special education teacher who also had a degree from an alternate program. And she said, you know, I work at this special school. They're recruiting us to come and we're going through alternative programs. And she said, the shelf life honestly is like 4 years. People could survive 4 years before they're quitting. Is there any way we can get this to those special educators who are doing the same hard work? And I'm wondering if you have heard, or was there any discussion at all to add other alternative pathway programs, or was there no other discussion for this year for alternative pathway programs?
So that's a great question. So I think, are you speaking about the PRIME program maybe through, is that?
Jennifer might have the answer, Jennifer.
Oh, yeah.
No, I think.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. And if this is related to teacher salary supplements, I want to verify. So we have always discussed other opportunities. This is not an alternate pathway to deaf education. This is the deaf education professional license. So right now, deaf education, if you have an endorsement that's tied to a special education license and you have an endorsement in deaf education, you are eligible for TSSP. But if you have the deaf education license, you are not eligible for TSSP. And due to that lack of alignment, this was brought forth from USDB in consultation with us, and it made a lot of sense that if we're giving a salary supplement for those with the endorsement, why wouldn't we give it to people who have the license? So it's not an alternately prepared pathway. It is the license degree earned route instead of the endorsement pathway that is currently eligible.
Okay, did you have a follow-up?
Just a comment. Yeah, and my question is for other special educators who follow a different route, if that had been discussed, but I think it sounds like it probably hasn't for this year, and maybe that's just a conversation we need to have at a later date with bill sponsors to consider again.
We did look at special education as Senator Sandal was interested in expanding this broader. He had some constituents reach out. The cost point was prohibitive. I think it was around $7 million to be able to expand it to others. And so that is the price tag that comes with a broader representation of special education.
Leah, did you have more to add? Oh, you brought your hand down. Okay, thank you. Board Member Earl?
Yes, I was interested in House Bill 72. It's the device filter amendments by Pulsifer and how that would affect maybe schools that have, I guess, the purchasing, or do we need to will we need to update technologies that we have or we're getting? I'm just wondering if there's any insights on that.
Can take that one, Chair.
Yeah. Oh, Jeff, are you going to respond?
I am. Jeff Van Holton, Director of Public Affairs. Great question from Board Member Earl. So this bill, just so everyone has a little bit of context, is actually amending parts of our, I believe either the civil or the criminal code. It's not in the education code, but it is requiring that any device manufacturer automatically enable a filter on the device, like a phone or a tablet, whenever the device is activated for the first time. That filter automatically turns on. The user can opt out, obviously, and turn off the filter. But if an 18-year-old, someone who was under the age of 18 received a device and the manufacturer had not enabled a filter device to filter out pornographic material or other things that are inappropriate, they would be guilty of, or they would be open to civil penalties up to $2,500. So my assumption is, moving forward, this is just something to be aware of. I don't know that we will need to amend any contracts or rewrite any contracts. There's a start date, I believe, in this bill, starting January 1st of 2022. So it would be contracts entered into starting next year. Manufacturers would just have to have that available. But I don't think we would need to necessarily change anything. Most contracts already have provisions that state, and all applicable state laws you have to adhere to. So this would just be folded into that. And I don't know if that answers your question, Board Member Earl.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if there was anything that would force us to do something on the back end or go retro, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
Okay, Board Member Lear?
I have another bill if you're ready to move on.
Yes, what bill would you?
I would like to ask some questions about SB 142, and I have about 4 questions.
Okay.
You ready?
Need to keep track of them, Board Member Lear. Question number 1.
Question number 1. I'm trying to establish, I've been emailing with Kathleen Britton, the director of the Child Nutrition Program, and I've not been able to be clear enough, but because the number of free reduced students signed up for free reduced lunch is used as an important metric in this. I want to clarify my understanding of how students sign up for free reduced lunch. Some years ago, when I worked really closely with this program, a student or a parent signs up, and by literally handing in the application, they're eligible. And then the feds did some auditing at the back end, and it was an audit of only about 10% of the students. I'm trying to verify that there is some required documentation when students initially sign up, if that has changed, or if it's just, sure, turn in your application and then you're qualified. Can anybody tell me that for sure?
I'm looking at the crystal ball here for any staff that will raise their.
Nobody wants to wade into that.
Kathleen Britton should be able to respond to that.
She's not on this call, on this meeting though, is she? Patty?
She should be, but let me just do a call just to make sure.
So Board Member Lear, are you okay if we go to your next question first?
Yes,
or-
fine.
Okay.
I'm fine. I think that's an important question though, because if it's whoever says they're free reduced eligible, that's a lot different than providing documentation. The numbers could change dramatically. Secondly, on line 201, the LEA is able to establish its own definition of at-risk students and then submit whatever number of students meet that definition. That troubles me. I don't like that. And I've heard from several LEAs and a couple of education entities that are also concerned about that very wide open, the possibility of that being a very wide open definition. So that's a comment, not a question. My third question is, which is a question, when did, I recall the board's discussion of this very clearly, and the board supported the concept of supporting students who are at risk of academic failure. And now this is morphed to students at risk. And I totally want to support students at risk, but that is obviously, again, a much more wide open category than students at risk of academic failure. So I'm curious when it morphed from what the board supported as a concept to the language in this bill.
Chair, I could answer that if you'd like.
Okay, Angie.
So, and I don't know if many board members have been able to see, but in the backup, I thought this might be helpful to show as I'm answering Board Member Lear's question. We've got a side-by-side comparison of the EARS program to the at-risk WPU. And I wanted to clarify that the definition of at-risk student is about how the LEA uses their funds, meaning how they can spend it. And it's not about how the funds are allocated to the LEA. So, and that is the current practice as well with our EARS program. So currently in the EARS program, or the enhancement for at-risk students, LEAs receive their funding based on, or get their allocation of funding based on a number of factors, which are up here. You see how the funding is generated based on number of students they have who have low performance statewide assessments, poverty, mobility, students who are English learners, chronic absenteeism, and homelessness. In this bill, the money again is generated or distributed based on the number of students who come from an economically disadvantaged home or situation. And that's essentially based on free and reduced price lunch. So I wanted to just clarify that the LEA being able to choose their own definition of who is at risk or how they're going to spend those funds is the same. Nothing has changed. That is currently the practice with our EARS funding. And so I think that I don't remember when this bill ever, and again, I wasn't tracking the bill, I wasn't drafting the bill, I wasn't in charge of the work groups. But I think from the very beginning of the discussions, it was always an intent in many ways to keep the allowable funding similar or the same to the current years. And I just wanted to clarify that the LEAs will be able to have that flexibility to choose which students are at most at risk in the same way they do with EARS. And it's very, what I heard is they took the same language and used the same language in the bill that we have in our board rule.
Okay, thank you. I may have misunderstood or misremembered. I guess I would prefer, rather than just have a common understanding, that we could button that down a little bit. If it's the same as something else, or if we could make that clear, I think it would ultimately help LEAs. My last, no, I have two more, but they're short. On line 203, it talks about the ELL add-on would be based on an English language proficiency test. And I'm wondering, I would assume there are several English language proficiency tests, and maybe even an LEA could come up with its own. I think I would prefer this if it put all LEAs on the same level ground and identified a test that would then be fair for all. So that language concerns me there. And did you have a test in mind? Did someone?
So board member Earl, sorry, Lear.
It's all the same. It's really funny.
Lear, Earl, they're close letters.
Same letters.
Just to clarify again, when you look in this language and it says at risk means the public education students below proficient on an LEA or a state board approved assessment, just want to remind everyone that that's how the LEAs spend their funds and not about how the funds get allocated to the LEA. So the funds will arrive or be generated or allocated to the LEA only based on free and reduced price lunch. So the reason why the board, back when you approved this language, and I believe it's the same language as in EARS, was because it allowed, and actually this LEA approved assessment may not be in EARS because the being below assessment or proficient in EARS is part of the distribution. And I think that's where the confusion is that I just wanted to make sure that you understood that the money won't be getting to the LEA based on LEA-based assessments. That will be how, but that might be how they measure whether their students are at risk of academic failure. So if you have a question about the local assessments, that would probably be a better question for someone else, either on Darren's team or maybe Leah's team.
I appreciate the clarification. I missed that. You're right. It doesn't, let me just repeat to you so I make sure I understand. The type of English language test would not be how you calculated the money going to the LEA. Rather, it would help the LEA decide how to use the money. Is that right?
That is correct.
Oh, sorry, Chair Huntsman.
Yes.
So English learner is one of the criteria for generating funding. And sorry, this is Tiffany Stanley, Chief of Staff. That the limited English proficiency is going to be related to how how funding is generated. And so I think what we just need to do is determine whether English language proficiency assessment is a defined term in the education code as the state adopted English language proficiency assessment, which is WIDA.
Right.
Because this is, I think, pulled from rule, this definition, our current EARS rule. It looks the same, but it may be a defined term in rule that is not a defined term in statute. So I think we just want to look at that, and then that would address board member Lear's question.
Thank you. I would just think that would be more fair for all LEAs if there was a designated test or assessment that applied to all and didn't leave LEAs wondering what was the most liberal assessment, if it in fact generates money. So thank you, Tiffany, for that clarification. And finally, online, I had one more question, and maybe we have some information about the free reduced lunch status. On line 341, you want to scroll up? Because I'm going to have to go back to my own.
And Board Member Lear, Kathleen is ready for those questions.
Okay, let's just talk about this. This should be easy. I just didn't know what this meant. And because most of it was old language, and so I'm just taking you at your word that it makes sense. I don't really get all the levies and all of that stuff. But can somebody, Scott, maybe if the indexing and growth described in subsections 3A and B result in the cost of the state in a given fiscal year that's less than the amount the legislature appropriated, the state board shall dedicate the difference to the, I have no idea what that means.
Sure.
Okay, Scott?
Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. What that means is it gives you, the board, the authority to, for lack of a better term, reallocate. So does that answer your question, Board Member Lear?
No, if the indexing and growth, I don't even know what that first phrase means.
With the indexing, yeah, the indexing and growth
Of what?
Of the, yeah, up above. I'm not sure who's driving. So let's see, it's lines 335 through 340, right? Of how that is describing the index. It's indexed each year to the value of the weighted pupil unit by making the value of the guarantee equal to that amount. So then if that process it results in a cost to the state in a given fiscal year that is less than the amount that the legislature appropriated, you can the board have flexibility or the authority for the allocation in the difference. So
To make it bigger, is that what it's saying? Or large?
To make it, let's see, larger. Yeah, so, to make it equitable in the distribution, I think is the best term. I can defer to Chief of Staff Stanley on the intent there. Am I accurate in saying it that way?
Isn't it about balancing? Is that what I remember?
Yeah.
It's a balance.
I really think it's intended to ensure that it's about distribution. It's about making sure that there's an equitable distribution if the costs to the state in any given fiscal year is less than what's appropriated, right? They're really trying to control for the ability to distribute. So, but I think this is a great question. So I just want to can I just double check that with Chief of Staff Stanley? I think it's about value add.
I might be able to answer
or
it.
And, yeah, fine, yeah.
So in the guarantee program, this is the voted and board guarantee program.
Okay.
Remember, there's a certain amount that goes to make sure that each increment, and when they say increment, it's a levy is like 0.0001, and each increments, they guarantee a certain amount per student for certain districts that generate less funding.
Right.
What I think is saying is if there's extra funds left, so if the legislature appropriates, say, $250 million for that program, but then after the property values come in, because those come in after the session, and we find out that the number of increments that were funded really only needed 240 million to cover that cost. It's saying that the board should take the difference, which might be $10 million, and then add additional increments, meaning add more funding essentially to that guarantee program. So all it is saying is, if we missed the appropriation, we gave you more funds than we anticipated it would take to guarantee all of those increments to those districts who have a lower property tax value per student. Then you just use that extra funding for that same program and either add more increments or guarantee increments or guarantee more per increment. That's what I'm reading.
That is super helpful for a non-math person. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a timing issue, Chair. for
Right.
tier two because of that time. And then go back to your earlier point, board member Lair, or your question. Yeah, it would grow, I guess, or be able to, distribute.
We'd have more to distribute. Would that be right, Scott?
Yep, that's absolutely right.
And we do it fairly. Okay. Then I guess we're just left with a question about free reduced lunch. And Kathleen, I guess, is available now.
Chair Huntsman, Kathleen is available.
Okay, Kathleen, thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Britton, the Director of Child Nutrition Programs for USBE. Can you please state
Yes.
what question you had?
Let me, and I've been emailing you about it, but it's not complicated. The wording's complicated. So as I recall, some years ago, if a student applied for, let's just talk about one student applies for free school lunch. He is immediately eligible. He fills out an application. He's eligible for free school lunch. And then at the back end, annually, I don't know if it was annually or every other year or what, the feds would audit those applications and audit only 10% of them, and then sometimes require documentation. But essentially, everybody who signed up was eligible. And I'm wondering, the regulations seem to read differently now, but I'm wondering if when a student signs up for free school lunch, he has to provide documentation initially, so there's some verification that his family does indeed qualify.
Okay, so when a student applies for free or reduced lunch, they have to apply according to the income guidelines. The
Right.
school will notify them within so many days whether they qualified or not. What you're saying about the back end of verification, there's a verification that is required by law from USDA that school districts need to verify anywhere up to 3% of their applications, depending on the response rate that they receive each year. During that time period, that is when a parent needs to prove and show documentation that they qualify.
Okay.
That is the only time of the year that they are required to bring in documentation.
Okay, so what you're saying, let me just make sure I understand again, that when a student applies for free school lunch, he's eligible. And there is then later an audit of up to 3% of the students, and some may or may not be deemed eligible. Is that right?
They are only eligible if they meet the economic guidelines.
Right, but they don't have to provide documentation on the spot with the application. That it's not like a fee waiver analysis.
No, correct. They do not have to bring documentation in unless they get pulled for verification.
That's what I'm asking. So that means we've got a very, very wide open standard for free lunch, for reduced lunch in terms of deciding the distribution, because there is no verification on the spot. It's just whatever the students and parents say it is initially. And that again, I think provides some opportunity for LEAs to game the system. That's too unfair, but to take advantage of that lack of documentation. And let me add one more thing. They only have to qualify for free school lunch. These are going to be applications for some LEAs who don't even provide school lunch or participate in the school lunch program. Isn't that accurate? Angie, that's beyond Kathleen's experience.
Or I maybe can answer that for you. For schools or charters or school districts that do not participate in the National School Lunch Program, they can develop their own type of fee waiver or application to show. They cannot use the National School Lunch application, but they can develop their own.
Oh, that's even more concerning, because I think, again, that doesn't keep the playing field level. I would like the same standards to apply to all LEAs applying for this very significant amount of money. Thank you so much for letting me ask all those questions.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay, we've got a few other board members that want to get involved here. Board member Straight.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Lear, for that thorough review. This bill is is one that's popular among a lot of groups. And I've heard suggestion in answer to your question on school lunch that use academic proficiency as the guide. We have that documentation instead. My take on this, though, is there's lots of interest in this bill. The direction of this bill is, I think, right where we want to go. You know, it's the first step on the study that is ongoing. It addresses at-risk students. I think there are many questions, including the ones that Carol brought up. But I think this bill is going to move forward, and I think we want to be at the table. I think lots of other educational groups are going to be at the table on this, and so I think we should support it.
All right. Member Hart.
Yeah, I have a question. I couldn't see one way or another. Can students be double counted, say, for both free and reduced lunch with the 0.3 and limited English proficiency with the 0.1 if they qualify in both categories?
Yes, I believe so. And Tiffany can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they will be counted twice if they fall under both categories.
Okay, second question. What happens when there are schools that, by virtue of the number of students that are eligible for free and reduced lunch, are completely free and reduced lunch, which then does not require the free and reduced lunch form? And the name of that program is escaping me. I'm hoping, is it Kathleen is still available? Does that trigger then 100% of the students earning the additional weight in the per pupil unit?
So it's Kathleen still available?
Sorry, I was on mute still. I'm here. So I'm trying to process what you asked. Are you asking, can you?
Okay, you know that the schools that by virtue of the option that districts have of schools going 100% free and reduced lunch without the form. I'm sorry, I don't recall the name of that program.
The CEP school? CEP,
yes.
Community eligibility.
Yes. Yes. So when that is triggered and every student receives free and reduced lunch without the application, does that mean that they would then 100% of the students earn the additional weights under this bill?
I know that all those students that are free and reduced on a CEP school, if it helps, those students have already been determined usually through SNAP or other agencies that they qualify for free and reduced. It has to be at least 62% or higher of the student body.
Correct. So say I'm sorry.
Let's have Tiffany answer that because it's more on the bill and she's more into that program side. So the question is that whole school is required is eligible for the WPU add-on. That's your question. Is that correct?
No. Okay. So at 62%, which I had forgotten what the number was, if a school hits 62% or higher, the district can shift to a different program, which makes 100% of the students be eligible to receive free and reduced lunch. Does this program mean that all those students, 100% of the students, are now eligible for the additional weight, or is a school going to have to go back and somehow certify these students in order to earn that additional WPU? Does that make sense, Tiffany?
I think so. And I think this is a data business rule conversation or question. So Scott or anyone else, feel free to chime in. But I think this definition is used in the current EARS rule, and we collect this data from LEAs regularly. And so I guess the question would be for that business rule, if a school shifts and meets that criteria to shift to basically 100% free reduced lunch, even though only 65% qualify, what are they reporting up to the state? The 65% or the 100%, basically?
Aaron Bruff has his hand raised. Maybe he's got the solution here, the answer. Aaron?
Aaron Bruff from Data Statistics. Thank you. It's a wonderful question. As the practice is currently set in the Utrecht submission, 100% of those students would qualify. They would not need to go back and recertify them for that free and reduced lunch. It would just flow in. So for in the case of San Juan School District, we get 100% indicator on each of those students. When I say 100%, every student gets that flag or that indicator that they qualify for the free and reduced lunch program. And hence, when we take that information and then move it over for the finance team to work on the money behind it, it would go 100% over to them. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't need to advocate for some other additional mechanism if our schools that are so highly impacted that they're triggered under that program, that they don't have additional reporting burden in order to access the funding that they need the most. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Moss? He's had his hand up, down. Are you still trying to keep you in the order? Did you have a question or was it answered?
Well, thank you. Maybe just a process question to clarify. I've also received input from folks in my district who feel like while English learners and free lunch have a fairly significant correlation with challenges in academic performance, it's not a perfect correlation, and there are LEAs who might lose out, and I think Member Straight spoke to this. My question is whether that's open for input on whether some measure of falling behind academically is going to be considered as one of the allocation factors up front. It's certainly one of those factors that an LEA can consider in allocating at-risk money once they get the money. But is that under consideration? Does anybody know whether that is being discussed for schools or districts, I guess LEAs, who may not qualify but may have some serious academic challenges?
Tiffany, or you want to respond, or Angie?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay.
This is Tiffany.
Yeah, this is Tiffany. Thanks. So going back to the results of the cost function analysis and the study, right? It's the question of adjusting for a cost factor that's beyond a district's control, that's completely exogenous to the district and the school, or providing funding based on a definition of at risk, right? And it's these kind of two purposes, right? And I think the notion is that in order to provide for those equal educational opportunities as outlined in statute, that the cost of providing the needed services and supports for Utah students from those economically disadvantaged backgrounds is greater than the general student population. And the cost function analysis provides an actual target weight based on that rigorous analysis to adjust for that cost factor. Providing a weight for based on performance on a statewide assessment per se. It would be challenging to determine what the weight should be. It could also be challenging in terms of some sort of odd perverse incentives it creates potentially by disincentivizing changes in programming, right? And I think another would be how to accurately generate funds in a disrupted year. So I think that part of the conversation is, adjust for the cost factor, but then allow for LEAs to be able to target the funds to at-risk students as defined a bit more broadly to potentially even include some of that outcome information.
Thank you. That's very helpful, especially the exogenous focus. I understand the incentive issue there.
Board Member Earl?
Yes, I was just wondering two things. I appreciate what Board Member Lear said. Almost everything I was going to articulate, she asked. I had similar concerns and similar questions, and I still have a question as far as possible tax increase, but I'm wondering what our time frame is today, because I have a bill I would be interested in talking about some concepts with it, and I'm just wondering what our time looks like for that so that we're not running out of time.
Well, we're definitely behind, but if you're up, we can certainly move off this particular item. And
are we ready to make some decisions on some things? I guess that's it, because it's in regards to House Bill 93. We discussed it last week. I'm just wondering, I guess that's what I'm asking, what our time commitment is to certain discussion things or moving into action.
Well, we're eventually going to get to action, so we haven't even got to the funding priorities yet. We're still in the space of the general session legislation and the bills. So you have something on a bill, or are you ready to because you want to bring a bill up and talk about a concern and then later bring it on the action time? Or what do you want to do there?
Well, I'd prefer to just do it on the action time, I think. So that's what that's why I was just looking at the
by to the action time. We're getting close, but we're just answering
thank you.
Concerns that board members have. So that opportunity is coming up. So save your thought, write it down, whatever we need to do to make sure that we get that incorporated into our meeting. Member Hart, did you have a question on something legislative?
Yes, if no one had any other questions on this bill, I wanted to ask about another bill.
You're good to ask on a bill.
Okay. House Bill 38, school technology amendments. I just would like some clarification on that bill, where it's going, what the concern is.
Chair Huntsman, I can answer that.
Okay, yeah.
Board Member Hart, this bill is, I'm sorry, I'm looking over at my screen with the bill on it. This bill is more in response to a situation that came up, I want to say 2 years ago, perhaps. Some of the board members do recall the situation with the database that UETN had, and there had been some parents that had found some inappropriate content on that UETN database. This is a bill that's essentially in response to that. We have had an email with UETN, just so everyone is aware, and they have a neutral position on this bill, but they did say this wouldn't really change current practices, something they're already doing. This is really more of a message bill to kind of let providers know you really should be careful because we're going to put this in code. But as you can see, it pretty much prevents, it sets up digital resource standards that have to be met, and UETN would have to report once a year to the legislature on any provider that may have violated these standards, essentially not having some kind of filter to prevent any inappropriate material going out to students through any of the they offer at schools. Does that answer your question?
So it requires a filter on the digital resource provider side in addition to the filters that are already on the district school sides?
Correct. So as you can see on line 60 and 61, if you can scroll down, Angie, a digital resource purchased or licensed by UETN and offered to students in public schools must have safety policies and protection measures that and does the following things. So it doesn't really specify if it's UETN that's putting those on or if it's the provider.
Okay.
It does need to be present either way.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Board Member Straight.
Thank you. I have a couple bills that I've had people who would like it opposed. Is that appropriate to bring up? But bills you want opposed, or is that a
That's
different?
on the action side. And we're not quite to the action.
Okay, then I will back off. I'm done.
Okay. And Board Member Hart, your hand still raised. Is that purpose or?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands raised on this portion. Maybe we better move to Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones on the funding priorities.
Chair Huntsman, can I make one comment before you move on? And I apologize. Yeah. I just wanted to remind or bring the board members' attention to this comparison document that is in the backup that we didn't really speak to it much, but this was something we brought back to talk about some of the issues of what funding's used for, what will the board's oversight look like, et cetera. If you have any questions for me or Tiffany after the meeting, we'd be happy to answer more questions and walk through this document in more detail. So thank you, Chair Huntsman.
And thank you for putting that together. It resolves a lot of questions, and so thank you. Okay, Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones.
So Chair Huntsman, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones, if we could just pull up the backups. So while, this is the budget tracker, right? This is the tool that we use to keep you updated and informed on, where things are at with your priorities and all of the other requests. So, and I won't spend too much time on this because not much has changed. There's been some tweaks, if you will, to some kind of, certain amounts and clarity with those. But overall, and if you could start to scroll down, you will see that you'll see that we updated your priorities from last meeting, adding 9 and 10 to them. All of these particular requests, with the small district-based funding and the small charter school-based funding. So there's 2 more meetings left in Public Education's Appropriations Committee, one tomorrow, and then their final one is scheduled for Tuesday, February 9th. So to date, all of your priorities have been briefed or presented to Public Education Appropriations Committee. In fact, all of the requests have been presented, save 2 of them. And the 2 that are left, they're not, they're on your list, but they're not your priorities. In addition to that, we're expecting on the meeting tomorrow, the meeting tomorrow consists pretty much, the bulk of the meeting is requests for appropriations by legislators. So the bulk of PEA will be made up tomorrow of the legislators coming with their particular bills or their request for, the request for appropriations. So what that means to us, or the so what of that is that, again, we're pretty much done with the presentation of your request to Public Education Appropriations Committee, save those 2. There will probably be a little bit more time spent on priority number 3, the intensive services request, as part of a bill that's being presented by one of the legislators tomorrow, and then specific to the program or the request to bring the program back. So we'll be ready for that tomorrow. If you could scroll further down, please, into the flow through, or other pass-through business cases. So again, all of these have been presented, save 2 of them, and we'll make sure that we get to those tomorrow with PEA. And then if we could pull the other backup up, please. Okay, so this is what we've been providing at each meeting with Public Education Appropriations Committee. So it's broken out by your ongoing requests and then subsequently your one-time request. So, and again, we clearly delineate what your particular priorities are. And so again, you know, we've gone through most of these, save two of them, which will be covered in tomorrow's meeting with PEA. So subject to any questions or concerns, Chair Huntsman, that concludes the update of where we're at as far as the process goes with legislative funding requests. Actually, let me add one more thing. We anticipate having the final, hey, what revenue is available for, you know, or in the education fund for K through 12 sometime early next week as well. Maybe as soon as tomorrow. So, and I'll make sure everybody's updated on that. So,
What you just answered my question was, have we heard usually about before now we have an idea Public Ed approach has to kind of work with. And,
yeah, I'll check. Yes, sir. No, I haven't heard yet, but I'll check. I'll double check with them.
So it's in case we adjust ourselves so that it. So thank you. Board Member Straight.
Yes, thank you. Deputy Jones, a couple questions.
Sure.
In regards to priorities 9 and 10.
Okay.
Does it make any difference that in the way they're numbered? Does it make any difference in that one is one-time funding versus ongoing? As far as this being funded? Do you have any take on that?
Right, Chair, through the chair, answer your question. Certainly that does. It goes to just what we were talking about. Once we know what revenue and what type of revenue, whether it's one time or ongoing, right? That could be, it could be a difference maker, right? As far as whether, you know, they can fund it one time or ongoing. I've seen where we've made ongoing requests, but then they're funded one time and vice versa in the years that I've been here. But when we get that final number, we know how much one-time money is available and how much ongoing is. That could play into it. That could be a difference maker. Did I answer your question properly?
Yes. I guess the question I have in my mind was one of fairness, and also one of, I don't want to make it to where it doesn't pass based on this ongoing versus one-time debate. So
right.
I guess in some ways, in my mind, I'm thinking that 9 and 10 should just be 9, but I know there's more history on that than I completely understand, and that perhaps we should change it to where they're both funded the same way. Any other thoughts on that from anyone?
Yeah, well, if I may too, Chair Huntsman, through the chair, Senator Owens has, you know, a proposal, a request for appropriation, and Angie or can jump in here, or Del Frost is here available, which my understanding is looking at, you know, related to the small district-based funding as a one-time request to give us, you know, that additional time to look at it too. So there is that in play, to your point, you know, to speak, and I think that's really going to be all finalized or figured out once we get an idea about, you know, where we're at with revenue. So, Angie, Dale, did I capture that right? I think it's worth checking with them on that piece.
I believe you're correct. I do not have any information that says you are wrong. So.
And there's a lot of lobbying happening also on the, where we're at a little bit of a disadvantage here is we kind of usually by this meeting, or we usually can have a meeting before they kind of sum up their, well, they package up their requests and get ready to move them, finalize their work at Public Ed approach and send it to exec, that we have an idea of what they're working with, Board Member Straight. And this year is a little odd because we don't. And the total amount of one time and also on the ongoing, but this particular year the ongoing is very difficult for them to react on. But it's normally we have an opportunity to make some adjustments to what, potential adjustments to what public ed appropriations is able to manage. So I don't know if that helps you.
It does. I guess if I could request when it's appropriate, if a more experienced board member, if they agree with me on this, would make a motion that might set this in a different light. Anyway, because I don't feel like I have the institutional knowledge to make that motion when it's appropriate.
Okay. Member Booth?
Not sure what that was, but
That was your music to get going.
terrific. That's great. I was just listening to Scott and recognizing the last 2 or 3 days as I've been reviewing all of the financial reports and the monthly expenditures. And now as we come to all of these important requests that Scott is carefully with his staff presenting to and keeping clear for our legislators, just how appreciative I am. I feel overwhelmed with the money that's coming in and out. Of course, I feel overwhelmed in my own household, but just looking at USBE and what's coming in and going out and keeping track of all of that, and then think of the legislators and how much more they've got to keep track of. But I am so appreciative as I look at these backup documents, the clarity, the consistency. I know that there's got to be some major appreciation on the part of those legislators because of the careful way that we're being represented and that these important requests are being moved forward by Scott. I just wanted to say thank you.
Chair, if I may, thank you, sir. It is a concerted and team effort. It goes very deep. We have such great staff here. Also, after yesterday's PEA meeting, a few of the legislators came by and thanked us as well for what is a good process, given all of the moving pieces and parts and all the different requests and all the funding that's out there. So thank you so much, sir.
Okay, Member Lear?
Question for Scott Jones. You provided last month a side-by-side comparison of the USBE requests and the governor's requests. Is that a one and done, or does that move at all?
Yeah, so it is a one and done in the sense it's done, right, with the comparison. You know, what we're trying to do is balance how much, you know, we already provided it. You know, if this needs to change as well, once we do provide it, we look to you to either download it or print it, right? Where decisions were made that going forward, the two key documents to keep you updated and informed would be these two, would be the tracker, and everything else, like the business cases, would be in prior meetings, so it's accessible still. But then it's up, you know, it's up to you. It's just a matter of trying to balance how much we put into the board backups. And, you know, I mean, at one point, if we were to have carried or pushed every document that we've provided to you thus far into this, you'd be looking at over 50 files. So,
and I think
we can do that. Yeah.
Scott, I think I was asking something different. I'm just
okay.
wanted to be, when you provided the comparison between the USBE requests and the governor's requests on that side by side, what I'm saying is, I know there's give and take between the two, and the legislature has to evaluate that, but the requesting numbers don't change from initially till now, right? Is that right?
Yeah, the governor's budget proposal is his budget proposal. Our requests are our requests, and to this date, they've all been presented with two left for tomorrow's meeting. So
thank you. That's all I needed. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
No, I know, and I didn't say it well. Thank you.
Vice Chair Davis, and I'm not seeing any other hands, so we'll take this one, and then we'll be moving into the motions after Vice Chair Davis's question, and I'll limit that to no more than 30 minutes. Hopefully it's less. And then we'll have a break, and then we'll get back to our agenda. So Vice Chair Davis.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is just in response to the question that Board Member Straight had asked if other board members had a thought about potentially changing up that 9 and 10. And I just wanted to add, as I listened to Deputy Superintendent Jones present those, he did such a great job. And I really think he already covered our bases there, because he did present them as we voted, the small district based funding request in ongoing and the small charter school base in one time. But for both, he said, you know, for the small district, we understand if this needs to be a one-time only because of the way things are this year. And in the charter school, he said, you know, of course, ongoing funding would always be appreciated, but, you know, we know the constraints this year. He really left it open to the members of PEA, and I thought did a nice job. I'm not sure that we would need another motion there personally because of the way it was presented.
Member Cannon.
I would like to make a couple of motions that the board support two different bills.
Okay, are they pre-prepared or are we making them on the fly here?
Oh, I'm prepared to, but I'm just making them as we go here.
Okay, what is your motion?
Okay, I would like the board to take a position of support on SB 154, which makes deaf educators eligible for the salary supplement.
Okay, so are you going to bring that up? Who's driving? Oh, okay, there we go. The support, a position of support, is that what you said?
Yep, correct.
On SB 154, is there a second?
Second, Lear.
Okay, you want to speak to your motion?
Well, I think we've already had discussion previously on this, and I think in the idea of having fairness for our educators, that I'd like to see this pass.
Okay, all right, discussion to the motion, to the position of support on Senate Bill 154. Member Earl, are you wanting to make a motion or you want to speak to this motion?
Are we, I'm sorry, help me with this. Are we listing out the motions we want to make? Is that separate?
We're putting motions on the table right now and voting on them. So
we're just working on board member Cannon's right now.
Right now, yes. And
okay.
the motion.
I'll wait in. Yep, I have a motion.
Okay, so, and I'll watch for your hands to go up quick, but there's the motion before the board is to take a position of support on Senate Bill 154. Is there any other discussion to the motion? I'm not seeing any other hands being raised. So the motion before the board is take a position of support on Senate Bill 154. Members at this time, please vote.
Unanimous, Chair?
Yep, that's what I'm seeing. The motion passes unanimously. Just so that we have plenty of time, so let's just kind of rotate around. I know there's a lot of motions, so let's do one at a time here and instead of one member pushing two or three through. So Member Earl.
Yes,
and then I see Hart's hands up, and then I see Cannon still there. Okay, so.
Okay, I actually would like us to two concepts with the House Bill 93, which is the suicide prevention bill. I would like us to look at two concepts to be moved with that. And I've asked, who has it? Angie has it for me. This is the way I think, so I'm sorry if it looked like I was trying to push legislation. I'm actually not. So just seeking that clarification. I just had to see what it looked like. And there's two issues with this. Do I need to put a motion on the table type of a thing? Make a motion before I discuss this, or?
Yeah, well, let's see if we get a second. So your motion is to,
Here's let me state my motion. My motion is I would like staff to work with the bill writer. So Representative King, this is his bill. And there's two concepts I would like him to address and make a substitute to change this bill.
Could we just have the number of the bill out loud?
House Bill 93.
and those substitutes would include, and I'm seeing
They would include
35.
separating out the elementary and secondary suicide prevention components. And then the second one, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank here. Hold on, let me look down my notes. And then the second one is they've listed one risk factor, and so it would be addressing risk factors would be that second concept. And then if I get a second, I'll speak to those.
I'll second there.
Was that Board Member Cannon?
Lear,
Was that Lear?
yeah, just for purposes of discussion. Thanks.
Okay, to speak to your motion.
Yes, so I'll address the first or the second one first because I have the notes in front of me. So from the Suicide Prevention Coalition plan, that's from 2017 to 2021, they have high-risk populations identified to include, and I could list all these, there's about 10 of them, but Native American Indians, individuals bereaved by suicide who also known as survivors of suicide loss, individuals in justice and welfare settings, individuals engaged in non-suicidal self-injury, individuals who have attempted suicide, individuals with medical conditions, individuals with mental and or substance and use disorders, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender population, and then the others deal with older individuals primarily. Oh, and then the adverse childhood experiences is listed on there. I'm just asking that they consider a broader description. They can leave what's on there. It's just that we've listed one risk factor and there are many risk factors, and just making sure we're incorporating those in. This is my wording, but that doesn't, I know we have staff that would have professional wording on that. So that's concept one. Concept number two is that we know that children that have counter ACEs, the research is becoming more prevalent that when we have positive environments for children, it actually helps to counteract the negative impacts of the ACEs that are experienced in children's lives. And so this correlates directly with what we've been doing already on the preventative end and the positive end. If you go back to our health standards, we actually incorporated in a lot of this, a lot of these proactive, these things that are preventative for children, but preventative in that they create positive environments and positive structures, from goal setting to, gosh, I'm just trying to think of them real quick, but there's just engaging with others, communicating, gratitude, kindness. Those are the kind of things that help to build resiliency in children and help to strengthen them so that they can, as they get older, combat negative things as they come to them. And so I think there's a difference between elementary and secondary ways that we approach suicide prevention. So I'm just asking that they look at breaking those out in some capacity. And that's the reason why I'm asking for this concept. And I have spoken with Representative King. I've actually spoken with Representative Ellison as well. Representative King said he would be very open to whatever concepts the board supported, and then he would ask, or we could ask our professionals that work through our department to assist in the correct language and dialogue for that. So That's my
Okay,
thoughts.
discussion to the motion. I see hands raised, and I'm not sure if it's regarding
That,
in line to, I have in line here, Hart, Cannon, and, well, Hart, Straight, and Cannon. I think they're trying, that they want to make motions, so we're speaking to this motion. I see hands raised. So, Board Member Cannon?
You're ready for my other motion?
No. I'm trying to find out who wants to speak to this motion, and everyone still has their hands raised.
Oh, I'm
So-
sorry. I said I had two motions and you cut me off at one, so I thought I better raise my hand to try to make that second motion.
So I'm gonna,
I'd
Oh.
like to speak. I'll speak to this, Chair. Mine's for this motion.
okay, well, I see you went up, so Board Member Lear?
I appreciate that Jenny has contacted a number of people. My challenge with this is being too directive to LEAs. I want to leave maximum flexibility to LEAs. And I also want to leave, my druthers is to leave this approach to professionals. I have lots of background and experience in law and education. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm not so certain that when a positive direction is good or bad or the best. So my druthers in the second part of this, I don't mind breaking out secondary and elementary. Second part of this, when instead of saying, if you'll scroll up a little bit go back to Jenny's version, my preference in that is to say LEAs should consider, or LEAs are encouraged to consider, or some language like that, because we really also have no enforcement or intended enforcement mechanism to see what LEAs, what direction they go for their policies, their use of the funds. I want it to leave it to the LEAs, and then San Juan can use it for what it needs. Summit Academy can use it for its best, in its best judgment, as can Rich School District. So in trying to be consistent with local control, I don't like LEA shall.
So can we have the motion back? Thanks. Vice Chair Davis, are you speaking to the motion?
Yes. I just met with a neuroscience scientist recently who did talk about, the kind of looking at those positive aspects of mental health. It gave me a lot to consider. I can see Board Member Lear's point about being too prescriptive to lawmakers. Sometimes in the past, we have supported a motion with a request that this would be considered, looking at, adding a positive aspect to this, and then also dividing out the age groups. So, that is kind of a positive speech to the motion, but also maybe the motion maker would consider simplifying the language to be a little less prescriptive to the lawmaker.
Okay. Board Member Cannon, I think your hand's up because you want to make a motion.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Member Earl, your hand is up to, I've never seen it go down after
So
you
when you're ready for closing comments, if there's anyone else to speak to this, I'd like to just make a.
Usually we don't require closing comments. Usually the person
Well,
makes a motion, they
but
speak.
on a motion, can I not make a right before we vote? Is that
Well,
correct?
something you want to add, that's what I'm saying. Your hand's up. Like, you have something to add?
I do have some, well.
All right.
Everybody else has spoken. On this, I will, yeah.
So you're good. I'm just, so this is your motion that's before the board.
Okay, so there's no other comments about this, I guess is what I'm asking. I just wanted to make a final comment after hearing what people have to say.
Oh, I've got another hand up, so I can't
Okay.
tell if they want to make a motion or on another bill or speak to this. So, Board Member Moss.
I just wanted to speak briefly in support. I don't know how tightly prescriptive the intent is, but I think it's a great effort to focus on those positive elements of a student's life. We spend a lot of time dealing with the negatives and try to counter those, including cyberbullying and that type of thing. But having 5 kids myself, I cannot say that I am a mental health professional or a neuroscientist, but I think I do appreciate the value of focusing on the positive. And it's amazing sometimes what those positives do to dissolve negatives that you've been trying so hard to counter. So that's more than anything just experience as a parent, but I support the idea of having this considered.
Okay. Vice Chair Davis, your hand's still raised.
Sorry.
Okay. Vice Chair Belknap, are you speaking to the motion?
Yes, Chair. I guess I want to just make sure that I'm clear on the motion that if we vote yes on this, that we are requesting that our staff work with the bill sponsors on these 2 ideas. 1, to separate the secondary and elementary program components, and number 2, to possibly address the risk factors in this legislation, how it's put. Is that correct?
That is the motion.
Thank you.
Your hand's still raised. You have another comment? All right. Well, the motion before the board is, we're going to vote on this. The motion before the board is that the board request staff work with the sponsor of HB 93 to address the following issue in a substitute bill. Number 1, separate the secondary and elementary program components, including providing additional components for the elementary portion of the program. And number 2, address risk factors in the litigation. Board members at this time, please vote.
Okay.
But
All right.
hold it, hang on.
I want to make a comment when all had spoken, so
Who?
I guess I didn't make that clear. I apologize. All right.
Let's hear. Let me bring
Well,
back call for the vote. I thought I brought you back so you could make your comment, and then Board Member Moss had a comment. So there's not a guarantee of the closing comments, but we're just
Okay.
taking comments. So go ahead, Board Member
I
Earl.
just wanted to be clear that this legislation already says shall in it without any changes. That is the current. So as far as directives, it already states shall. And so that I just used and this was just a model of, not an exactness to. So I just wanted to be clear on those items. Okay, thank you.
Now, yeah, now that creates sorry, Chair.
Board Member Lear.
That is confusing for me. So can we scroll up to the Jenny's version of this? Do you mind? Sorry, because nobody else has it. Where it says, and it says, shall include a suicide that primarily focuses on, and all of this language, Jenny, is your language. Is that not right? The red?
Yes, Representative Lear, if you look up at line 47.
Don't elevate me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Well, whatever you want there.
Yeah.
But
okay, but now that's moving
language. Even yeah. So is this the actual bill? This is the actual bill then, right?
Yes.
So oh great. I don't know if it's
in collaboration.
Yeah. So 47 already does shall, and then it lists items that
implement it. Right. And does it say consider though shall include programs and training and to address prevention of youth suicide, intervention, risk decreasing? But these aren't things. This isn't a prescribed approach. This is certain things that whatever approach it is, positive or negative, will address. Methods. I see this differently. That's shall differently than your shall. That's all I have to say. Your shall tells them how to do it. The other shall tells them to address certain issues.
So, Board Member Lair, the intent was conceptual. It wasn't, once again, as I explained at the beginning, so sorry if there was still that confusion. This is nothing more than a concept of possibilities. They will work with, staff will work with our professionals and the and Representative King to actually come up with the language. So this was conceptual in nature. Did that clarify?
Oh, not really. I mean, it still says shall if it said would be encouraged. I know it isn't, doesn't really help, but that's all right. I know what you're trying to say. That's
Vice Chair Davis, your hand's raised. Nope, there it went. Okay, we're gonna put this to a vote. The motion that's before the board is that the board request staff work with the sponsor of House Bill 93 to address the following issues in a substitute bill. Number one, separate the secondary and elementary program components, including providing additional component for the elementary portion of the program. And number two, address risk factors in the litigation.
Legislation.
Or excuse me, in the legislation. Thank you. I stand corrected. Okay, board members, please vote. I didn't, Vice Chair Belknap, I didn't see any opposed. Did you?
I did not see Board Member Lear. Board Member Lear is opposed. It just came on.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, the motion passes with one opposed. Thank you. Board Member Hart. Just keeping things in the queue as I stated before.
My hand was up accidentally.
Okay, Member Straight. Cannon, you're on deck. Member Straight.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, okay.
Thank you. Senate Bill 131, Public Education Building Standards and Processes. I think there's a lot of great concepts in this bill. I think it's well intended and has some application. Although it seems to be opposed greatly by local LEAs that I've talked to anyway. Because when you build a high school, it's a community center, and you don't want a cookie cutter. You want, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. As you move down, yeah, perhaps there might be some uses, but I think this doesn't allow enough local control. I think there's some positives like greater efficiency, economies of scale, those types of things, but I think it's lacking in that one area.
Let me help you with something because you're speaking to maybe a motion that's not on the table. Are you wanting to make a motion?
I am sorry. You know what? You're right. I apologize.
We're good. We're just one team. We're just work together. So you have a motion.
It's all there. Okay, so
you want to make a motion of support or?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we oppose Senate Bill 131, and I already spoke to it. Sorry.
We go to that space often, and so we're just here to help and following the Robert's rules. So we have a motion from Member Straight to oppose Senate Bill 131. Is there a second?
I'll second for the conversation.
And that was
Davis.
okay. Okay, you spoke to your motion. Did you want to add anything else, Member Straight?
Well, I think maybe just having the motion out there, it doesn't feel like there's much interest in it from the rest. So perhaps it's there and we sit on it and we can deal with it on another week. But if there is other interest, if people do have comments on it, I'd be glad to entertain those comments.
So we have discussion to the motion. Board Member Lear, your hand's raised.
It's supposed to be, I support the motion for all the reasons Member Straight said. Thanks.
Okay, Vice Chair Belknap.
Yep, and I actually don't support the motion only because we haven't reviewed it yet. I'd really like to have opportunity maybe next week to have Angie put that on our list to review before we take that motion. I haven't spent enough time in it. So that's the only reason I don't support it.
Okay, Member Cannon, is your hand raised to make sure I don't miss you on a motion?
Yep, I'm waiting to make my second motion.
Okay, Member Earl, are you speaking to this motion to oppose Senate Bill 131? Member Hyman.
Yeah, is this in relation to, and help me understand, Board Member Straight, is this in relation to some schools being in the $200+ million range compared to other schools being built for less, right? And legislation is trying to create a balance here to say, okay, just because you live in a certain area does not mean you necessarily need a palace to attend school. Whereas I've got places in my district, if I'm quite honest, that the building is literally falling apart. So I do, if this is the case, I do have a difficult time getting rid of this bill, just as we speak of helping bring balance here to the state children and different opportunities. Can you speak to that for me?
I think that's a great point. Here's what I would add to that. I know, for example, that as a city, we put over $1 million into a junior high several years ago to create greater facilities that become both public from the community as well as public with the school. You have examples of schools working with cities up in Cache Valley where they've built very large centers. We have examples in Davis County with a junior high that also has an aquatic center, and it's a mix. You also have so many elements that go into many schools. And here's the area where I think it really made a difference in the way I thought about it. Because there's many aspects of this bill that I think are very positive. And that is, we have so much happening with different styles of teaching, with student learning. Some districts are going to these different models of instruction that require different types of facilities. And if you look at some of the new buildings, for example, in Davis County, I think the newest high school is Farmington. They went to a completely unique learning. I'm thinking the right term here. But anyway, as far as the way they bring about instruction at that school is unique. And so I think this bill might be limiting in regards to that. I will admit that I think a great point was made that maybe we're at the wrong stage of this, and that perhaps this comes back around next week. I do appreciate the fact that it was brought up for further discussion, and I probably shouldn't have bailed on so quickly, but because I appreciate those questions. But yeah, I think it's something we really need to look at. And does that answer your question, at least somewhat?
Yeah, it does. I just, I get there's different styles, and there's different communities that quite frankly require specific types of structures to go within those communities. So I understand that. I do appreciate how this bill talks about publishing the lowest, average, and highest cost. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will take the lowest every time, but I do appreciate the legislation wanting to take a closer look at where the money is going and why. Right? Just because we have the money in a certain area doesn't mean we need to throw it all towards a building. Per se. So yeah, I agree that maybe taking a closer look at this and discussing it at a future time would be helpful.
Brent, with that, I believe, can I do this, Lorraine, can the sponsor remove the motion, or does it have to stay on the table? I can't recall.
No, he could just ask the body if he can take it, basically. I can't think of the word, but you know what I mean.
Without objection.
Without objection, you could do that.
Okay. Wait, is that, you're the sponsor, without objection, would you like to remove your motion?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna, but as this thing comes back, and then as board members were looking into this, there's a piece on there that puts a burden, has requirements on USBE. Be sure and spend some time and take a peek at that. That kind of makes us look like a building official or something like the state has, and it's a different space. So please take some look at that before our next meeting. Okay. So I'm removing the motion from the table unless there's some objection. Not hearing of any. Member Cannon, you had a motion?
Yes, sir. I would like to make a motion that the state board support HB 134, Notice of Public Education Reporting.
Do we have a second?
Second, Lear.
And we kind of slipped past the half hour that kind of allotted for these motions, but I think this is good work. So comments and that, if we can be really, really quick, would be great. You want to speak to your motion, Board Member Cannon?
Yes, please. I believe that Angie discussed this with us briefly in our January meeting. The idea behind this motion is to address the excessive number of reports that are required of LEAs and of USBE. It says down here, in addition to other information requested, legislators will know whether or not their proposed bills will impact reporting requirements for LEAs, and if so, whether the impact increases or decreases their reporting requirements, and whether the change in requirements is high, medium, or low. So this is an idea of tracking exactly what kind of reporting we are requiring. And I know as a member of Standards and Assessment Committee, we have been dealing with the 22-page assurances document and trying to figure out a way to wrangle that in. I think it's not a bad idea to do some tracking of what we're requesting of others. And when people are bringing forward bills, if they have an idea of the impact that bill creates in terms of reporting for LEAs, that would be helpful.
Chair Huntsman, may I ask a clarification? This is Angie.
Yes.
Board Member Cannon, is it at this bill or HB 42 or HB 300? The reason why I asked, this bill actually directs the legislative analyst's office to provide, I just want to make sure I have the right one, because she has 3 bills that do a lot that is similar to what you just stated. I just wanted to make sure we have the right bill.
Okay, well, in my notes, I had HB 134 by Pulsifer. I'm sorry, Angie, I'm not familiar with the other ones. Is it the intent of my motion better encompassed?
Nope, you were correct. My mistake. Thank you.
Okay, well, good to, if we have a concern, to share it. So thank you, staff. So the motion, thank you, Board Member Cannon, speaking to your motion. This is to support, the motion on the table, support House Bill 134. This is our last motion of the day. So we're speaking to that motion.
We have a second chair on this.
I thought we had a second.
I think Board Member Lear seconded.
Thank you.
So speaking to the motion, I have, trying to keep track of order, Member Moss.
Thank you, Chair. I just will share that Member Davis and I were involved in a group of discussions with Representative Pulsifer. We were there by invitation. It was not an assigned task. We didn't speak for the board, but we weighed in. At the time I started, I was on the charter board. Member Davis was on this board. Had a lot of people weighing in from districts and charters, large and small. And so I think it was a great opportunity to hear a broad range of input. I should also mention a lot from USB staff, from Deputy Superintendent Nielsen and Stallings. And so I speak in support. I was just going to raise, it sounds like we may be out of time, but the two companion bills are Bill 300 and HB 42, which also address the questions that perhaps should be raised about existing reports and also prospective reports. And so maybe at another point, I could come back and address those two, but I would like to speak to this one in favor as one of kind of a three-part solution that came out of that working group and was proposed by Representative Pulsifer.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say the same thing that Board Member Moss said. I wanted to make it clear because an email was sent with some of our names on it, mine and Jim's and Angie's and Darren's, and just wanted to make it clear. I knew you had not voted on this and was not trying to represent you and was not assigned by Chair Huntsman. But I do think the feedback was salient, but I think we also need to realize that and I've said this all along the way, there are a lot of reasons why some of the reporting requirements are the way they are, and a lot of it comes from audits that come to us. So the conversation is pretty broad and context matters. And so, while I do support this, I think it's a bigger conversation even than just what USBE would have control over. But it is a starting place for sure.
Board Member Booth.
I'm very eager to begin the conversation wherever else it needs to go. I know after 16 years on the NEBO board that the most common concern from any of our leaders of learning in the individual schools at the district level is this very difficult challenge of not only reporting burdens, but application burdens, just general paperwork. And not in any way are we wanting to suggest that accountability is not a chief priority. That's so critical, but we've got to find ways to relieve the burden so that they can turn more of their attention to educational leadership and the students that they have responsibility for. So I'm very much in favor of our support to this motion.
And thank you. Vice Chair Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. Jeff, will you pull back up the bill? I have one concern, and not that I'm not going to support this. No, not that one. Okay, at the very top, please. Where it states, this bill requires the State Board of Education to inform the Office of Legislative Fiscal Analyst when a bill impacts reporting requirements for local education agencies. I have a little bit of rub with that if we miss a beat here, that if we miss something, it's disconcerting to me, and hopefully we won't. But I think that's a lot of pressure on making sure that we don't miss any of these bills coming up, that the effects it has on LEAs.
Okay, thank you. Not Board Member Booth, your hand's still raised. But did that conclude your comment? Okay, thank you. The motion before the board is to support House Bill 134. Board members at this time, please vote. Here's the voting is complete and the motion passes unanimously. Board members at this time, think it's a much deserved break opportunity. It is 3:50 on 3:51 on my clock. Let's be here at 5 after, and we're going to get right into committee reports.